Welcome to Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. I'm Dee Kelly, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Shalley. We're a coach and a therapist who love talking about how inner work can help you live with more awareness, purpose, and freedom. Welcome to the show. Jim, great to be with you. I'm glad we're coming back from the last session we had, and I'd love to start where we dropped off. We were talking last week about the phrase looking back to move ahead. And part of that is paying attention to how your family used emotions in the home when you were growing up. However, I have the feeling that every once in a while you'll have somebody who will look at you and go, "What? I have no idea what you're talking about." So give us some examples of, if I'm reflecting, what am I looking for in my family of origin? What are the cues of how they used emotions, and maybe a little bit of what the implication of that is?
Yeah, one of the simplest ways to do it is to get them to identify how their parents interacted emotionally. One of the most common one is dad didn't want to talk, mom wanted to talk. So they could quickly identify the fact that, well, yeah, mom used to want to, talk, and then dad would put the newspaper up or do whatever to avoid that. Or she would follow him around the house wanting to talk through things, but then he would avoid that. So that makes a connection immediately and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, mom didn't really want to talk," or "Mom didn't want to talk," depending on how that kicks them into thinking about. Again, I always use the phrase, "This is just diagnostic. You're just trying to figure it out. This isn't about blaming anybody or trying to figure out who's at fault. It's just figuring out the dynamic of how your family used emotion." And I said, sometimes both are talkers, sometimes both are avoiders, but most of the time, one's an avoider and one wants to talk it. They'll talk it through. And once they begin to identify that, they go, almost always there's a recognition reflex. Oh, yeah. Dad would always get frustrated and leave the room. Or mom would always want to talk. And she would always say, "You never want to talk." So then they begin to kick into a, oh, okay. And then the next transition would be, do you see that in your own relationship?
Mm,
And almost
yeah.
immediately, the other person will say, "Yeah, you do that just like your mother, just like your father." And that gets them the ball rolling as far as how they used emotion.
S- Which my observation is that it's generally true that the partner in the relationship is far better at seeing my blind spots than I am seeing my own blind spots.
Yeah, yeah, the phrase really is, you're an expert in the other person's family because you're not a
Yeah.
part of the decision. Yeah. And that can be contentious as well because everybody wants the person to behave the way they do with their family of origin. But the outsider is almost an expert, so they can point out, "Oh, well, you're crazy." Well, then the other person, "Well, your family's crazy in this area." So so then they have to realize, "Whoa, wait a minute. How about you just take ownership of the crazy in your family before you try to project it onto your partner's family?"
Yeah. And just to be clear, in a relationship, when you make statements about the male, that usually it's just whoever the masculine energy is might be more prone to be the one to go quiet or not want to deal with what the emotional problem is. And the feminine energy, whether it's a same sex relationship or a heterosexual relationship, wherever that feminine energy is, would be more prone to pursue that emotional conflict, try to resolve it, get it done now. Fair enough?
Yeah, and from my perspective, unfortunately, most of the expression of the masculine and feminine are more dysfunctional than functional. For example, the balance between the masculine would be to avoid or then become too aggressive. So either way, they're trying to avoid the conversation. So I can either go to the other room or I can get angry and push you away with my anger. That's the dysfunctional cycle. For the feminine, it would be like they want to talk it through, keep talking, keep it incessantly asking questions, pushing, 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 or they go in the corner and pout. That's that's usually the dysfunctional cycle of communication. Obviously, the goal is to get to the healthy masculine and the healthy feminine, and that's always the delicate dance as far as how do you get there and what does that look like? Because most of the time, they come to a therapist because they have a really dysfunctional cycle of those energies.
Yeah. And the even more
And it's not,
complicated,
just to clarify, it's not like we said last week. It's not male or female.
right.
This is energies that everybody possesses. Yeah.
Which then points out the even more complicated effort of whoever holds that masculine energy to try and actually embrace the feminine side of themselves, or for whoever holds that feminine energy to actually embrace the masculine side of themselves and not polarize even further, but learn from the partner who exemplifies that piece that's weak inside of me.
Yes. The way that I say it, masculine will define something needs to be said. The feminine will show you how to say it.
Hmm. Wow. So it'd be nice if I could master both of those.
Yes, absolutely. And not just blurt out the masculine, you're a jerk, but
Yeah.
have the feminine come in and say, how can you say to this person they're a jerk so that they can hear it? Yeah. Again, think about it. We all are pretty unconscious, so we just want to react. It takes the thoughtfulness just to have that moment to go, wait a minute, what do I really want to say here? I want to confront this person, but I also want them to hear it as best they can. And again, that will calm you down before you just blurt something out.
So that's one example of what I might find in my family of origin, but I'm guessing there are just dozens of ways that I could look at how my mom manipulated emotions, or how my dad ignored something when I needed some affirmation, or um, either one of them limiting whether or not they said "I love you," or the withholding of certain rewards in a variety of ways, and the kind of emotions that that caused. Um, and what we both have observed is you can have two children that are raised in the same home, and they deal with those things in very different ways. You kind of alluded to that with the sarcastic families, that somebody in that system is getting hurt over and over again, and they grow up in a very different way than their sibling might. So is that genetic predisposition, or is it just we actually have different parents as we're growing up?
Yeah, the way that it's usually framed is that each child is raised in a different atmosphere
Yeah.
because they interpret the behavior of mom and dad or the parents differently through their own unique set of skills or their own emotions or their own needs as well. For example, there are families where kids could feel abused, but the other kid could feel like they were connected to that person that was abusive, but they saw it differently.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. And is that genetic? Is that learned behavior? Well, it can be learned in the sense if mom was an accommodator of an aggressive, abusive father, and then a daughter comes along and uses the same pattern to
Mm.
accommodate. So they get into an enabling situation in their own relationships oftentimes because of the modeling.
I was going to save this till the end, but it seems very appropriate now. The propensity for many to marry somebody that's just like one of their parents, and then 5, 6, 7 years into their marriage, they go, "Oh crap! I realized I had married one of my parents and never resolved those issues then, and this is horrible." Do you experience that sometimes in your
Uh,
practice?
Almost always.
Yeah.
That's why this may be a little bit controversial, and I've had some pushback, but for me, oftentimes love is kind of neurotic because it's based upon oftentimes the issue that I have with the parent that I have the most issues with. So if I was raised by an avoidant father or an aggressive father, I will bring that out and I'll be attracted to it, trying to resolve it within me, even though that's not the conscious thought when you're dating. It's like I'm going to get them to notice me. And so this is the deceptive part of dating. So you can date someone who seems very emotionally available and and very present. I mean, the typical thing is a woman that's attracted to a man who just is so present and so involved, so into the person that 5 or 6 years into the marriage, all of a sudden that person is just not there because the father. wasn't there when she was a child. And they're always stunned by that. It's like, "Oh my word, I married my father." And it's like, yeah, that's what we do. And that's why I say likability is so much more important than love, because likability means I like this person generally. Whereas love is based upon, in my opinion, that deeper level of attraction. In other words, there could be two equally attractive people, but I'm more attracted to this one than that one. Why is that? Well, in my opinion, there's unconscious stuff with that person that's pulling at my heartstrings, thinking that I'll resolve that because I'll be able to get their attention. They'll be the person I want them to be because of that wound from childhood.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that neurotic attraction often has associated with it a strong erotic
Oh, abs
attraction.
and oftentimes that's what gets us in more trouble because the sexual erotic attraction is so strong that we think this has got to be it. And yet you find out that people that express that so quickly, those can fall apart as quickly
Yeah.
because it's a complete projection that in my mind, the stronger that is, the more likely is there's an unconscious pathology that's there.
Would you also agree, though, that when that comes out in a relationship, depending on how it shows itself in terms of the dysfunction, but you have the potential not only to bring about healing in the relationship that you're in, but that part of that pathway is to bring some resolution to the unresolved pain of childhood, which can lead to an incredibly healthy future
Oh,
if you dig into
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I mean, really, you're getting at the heart of what projection is, because we project the wound inside of us onto someone else, thinking that they're gonna heal that. And then when the projection falls apart, which typically happens in most every relationship, whether they want to acknowledge it or not, I call it the disappointment phase, which sounds negative, but in my mind, it's like, no, everybody that's been in a relationship knows there's a disappointment phase where you realize this is kind of who I married. I thought I was marrying this person. I'm marrying this person. Oh no. So it's like, and so that's trying to resolve that piece of, wait a minute, I'm just projecting onto them. I have to really own that part of me that is wounded. And yes, everybody wants somebody externally to heal that because that's what a parent is supposed to do for a child. But most parents are wounded, like we all are. And so they don't know that. And so they pass the wound on. And then again, the child thinks, okay, I'll marry the right person, then that will heal. And that's usually a disappointment phase where they realize, okay,
Yeah.
I didn't marry that person. I have to figure that out. And then the other part of it that may be off topic a little bit would be when someone goes on that journey and their spouse doesn't.
Hmm. Right.
And that can be really, really distressing for the relationship.
The notion of addressing that parental issue and the disappointment phase in the relationship that comes from that, that's not just in marriages. Any long term relationship is going to hit that disappointment phase at some point and provide an opportunity for growth, or I'm going to stay stagnant here.
Yeah, friendships, work relationships, all of that. At some point, you'll have to deal with what another way of looking at it would be the control issue. It's like, what am I expecting from these people that I'm
Yeah.
not getting? And then I have to realize, okay. And it can be a real crisis because I may want to change jobs. I may want to do something else because in that moment it's not as satisfying because I thought it would resolve this and it hasn't. I mean, again, the key part of all this is conscious living. How do we get to a place where we can be as conscious? And like the last time we talked about the true self, to get to a place where I begin to develop who I really want to be with all of the stuff I carry with me from oftentimes generations of dysfunction in my family system.
Yeah. At some point in the future, I'd love for us to have a discussion about something that I deeply believe is true in most people's journey, and that is we often talk about individuation from our family of origin, but I also believe that there is vocational individuation, and that a very similar pattern happens when we have this sense that we have to move out of what has been vocationally and try and explore what could be vocationally in the
Well,
future.
yeah, it's the same thing as far as faith systems.
Yes.
You're raised a certain way and your experience isn't lining up with the theology or the way that you were raised, Yeah, that's a really, really threatening place for a lot of people because they assume they need to throw it all out. The term they use now is deconstruction of your faith. And so, and a lot of them will just say, I no longer believe in God. So, wait a minute. Do you want to believe in God? Because what you're doing, you're growing up, realizing that the way you were raised, you were carrying oftentimes parents' projections of what they wanted you to be. And we all fall into that pattern. Then there's a crisis or a trauma typically that happens to get our attention. Do we want to keep living that way? And so from my perspective, that's when we decide to grow up and begin to own that. Some will, and they'll move through it, and they may change churches or faith systems or even jobs and things like that, or they'll break away from their family because it's too toxic. They'll move a different direction. Uh, and then they're left to kind of say, well, what does that look like? Well, again, that's what I say is growing up, taking responsibility for it. Who do I want to be? What's the good stuff of what I was raised, and then what have I learned that I want to be, or who I want to be?
But the whole idea of looking back at your family of origin to understand how emotions were used, I think that that is so intertwined with value systems that I grew up in a value system, and there is such emotional weight that accompanies a value system. And when I am exposed to different ways of thinking, or I start seeing the world from a different perspective, there is an enormous tension with the family of origin inwardly. Like I'm assuming my parents will either get incredibly aggressive or disown me if I share what I'm actually thinking. And so this piece of knowing myself and trying to grow involves an evaluation of how has my value system shifted from that family of origin.
Yeah, and I would say in a larger philosophical discussion would be when a system is too rigid, somebody will always come along to shake that up.
Has
And
to.
yeah, and again, the goal is to get everybody in a healthier place.
Yeah.
As far as accepting the journey. But yeah, you're right there. But I mean, sometimes it can last generations because there's such a strong dominating spirit. But there's always some outlier or scapegoat or however we wanted to call them that tries to break through that to get people to deal with the complexities of being human and all the different varieties of ways we can express our humanity. So,
Yeah. So I'd love to close on a line that I've heard you use that I think is wonderful, but I'd love for you to just make a couple comments about it, put a little flesh on the bones of this statement. And the statement is this: the most important relationship you will ever have is the relationship with yourself. Um, Tell me what that means to you and how you see it played out.
well, I'm sure it's unique to me. No one's ever put those words together exactly like that. History of the universe. So I was able to bring all those words together in that particular way. No, I think it's obvious other people have commented on that, but for me, the monologue in your head and as functional or dysfunctional as it is, it determines your quality of life. I mean, through the last few election phases, I'm always amazed at what people conjure up in their minds that they think it's absolute truths, and yet it's not. It's based upon family of origin issues. It's based on all those things from that perspective. So as you monitor that, one of the first things you do as a therapist is to get them to kind of monitor what their thoughts are telling them, and then they do put a lot of trust in the therapist to kind of guide them as far as what's really functional and what's dysfunctional. And I think that's why a therapist has to sort through and be as aware as they can of their own biases, because that can guide what's functional or dysfunctional. I mean, I've had lots of clients come in that have seen other therapists and they say, well, they told me to leave my marriage. And I would say that's probably not true, but that's what they heard. And so does the therapist have an unconscious agenda that they lead people towards a divorce because they think that's the best solution? You never know. That's why it's so interesting to try to sort through how you guide someone as far as functional, dysfunctional thoughts. But yeah, no, monitoring that and they begin to notice in any situation, what's that first thought they have? You know, the ants, automatic negative thoughts. Uh, it's so important to identify. Monitoring that is really crucial. So the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself. You can't be functional out here if you're not functional in here. It always comes out. And that's the projection piece we've talked about a little bit.
Yeah, I've always felt that in cases of conflict, I need to pay attention to what the conflict is inside of me, because I always think my default is to assume that that conflict is driven by the other person, by the situation, the circumstances. But it's almost as if the unresolved conflict within attracts those individuals or circumstances to expose what's going on inside of me. And the more I'm able to reflect inwardly, the less likely that conflict is to escalate. So ties into what you're saying about the relationship I have with myself.
I mean, again, one of the best strategies is if I'm triggered by something, I have such a strong reaction to it. From my perspective, more often than not, that's a projection. It's something, a denied aspect of myself that I'm projecting onto someone else. That if they would just behave the way I want them to, we'd be great.
Yeah.
And in couples counseling, it's like this. It's like if they were just different, if they were just different, we'd be good. And that you have to get through that hurdle because on some level, they absolutely believe that. If that person would just behave, if they would just talk to me, if they would just discuss stuff with me, we would be fine. Well, then what does typically the spouse say? Well, when I bring things up, you always tell me that's not true. Or something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Each of them bringing their own internal issues and, in essence, talking to themselves. They just don't realize that they're talking to the projection of themselves on the other person. One of the things that I hope we can talk about in the future, because it's been a positive fascination of mine, is that idea of triggers and how they appear in dream images. We often think of looking at dream images and what they reflect as a part of me, which is true. But it is also an appropriate question to ask, why now? Why did that dream image come up? What has happened in the last day or two that triggered a memory, a thought, a reaction that would be brought into the dream? And dreams have a great way of identifying or at least alerting us to the fact that there are triggers that we're not paying attention to.
Well, that'd be great to identify even how projection shows up in dreams.
Agreed. Agreed. We'll do that in a future episode. This has been great. Always great to be with you. I hope there's been something here that everybody could take something away. At least Larry.
Well, these are all for Larry, so we're trying to help him out.
That's it for this episode of Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to follow, rate, or share it with someone who might appreciate it as well. Thanks for being here, and until next time, keep growing, stay curious, and take good care of yourself.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff.